We have I have been involved in multiple districts doing multiple things as we're doing tonight. Last night we were with the West Florida district. In the West Florida district, they actually did a Zoom poll at the very beginning of the meeting that we did for 2 hours. And I want to share with you what their concerns were. One of the questions was, could you please share with us the three greatest needs for you getting back into the system, for you getting ready to start your Sunday morning experiences, for you making the transition back? So I want to share with you the three top needs that came out of the West Florida team last night. You may agree with them, you may not agree with them. The number one, and by the way, every need had 5 options. Need number one, need number two, need number three had 5 different options that they could choose. The number one need from point number one was congregational fear of gathering together. 49% of the pastors, almost 50% of the pastors last night, their number one concern was when we get back together, the possibilities of failure, the possibilities of conflict, the possibilities of being outside the statutes of the law, and what happens if we can't produce like we've done on the online. That was their number one, was online church as a new easy substitute for in-person gatherings. 37% of the pastors was very concerned that the online church could become the easy substitution and people would not come back to the Sunday service. The second need that they had, that they felt, and remember they have the 5 options with the same five options. The second need was just like the first one. For the pastors who did not pick the fear of congregational gathering as the first, they picked it as their second. So together, from the first and second, congregational fear of gathering, the pastors, 89% of the pastors, that was their primary or secondary concern, getting back together. Then the same thing on their second online church as a new easy substitution, that was 30. So 67% of them were afraid of the online effects of the online church. And then the third need that they had, and this one kind of caught us. The third need was, first of all, church finances at 37%, and the second one was individual finances at 35%. And so with that information and what we have been working on, they were almost confirming what we were feeling that we have heard from consultants, from our meetings, from our gatherings with different consultants and things of that nature. So we're gonna, for the next 35, 40 minutes or so, we're gonna talk about 3 different areas for what COVID-19, and we're gonna talk about the structure of the church setting up to go back in. Number 2, we're going to talk about the ministries, that how should the ministries look as you go back in, and what should you be doing from the pulpit, or what you could be doing. And number 3, how are we going to re-engage leadership back into the system? And so with that, the first thing we want to share with you is that Doug Clay was on a conference call yesterday with David Strahan. I mean, all the men's and Light for Lost directors have a weekly Zoom call. And so we invite a special guest to come on. And we had Doug yesterday. By the way, Pastor Ken, Pastor Michael, we had Ron Maddox the week before share his testimony of what it was like to go through the coronavirus. And it was fascinating what he shared with us. And he was very, very honest with the men. And so just to give you that point. But Doug said a couple things yesterday that I called him afterwards to visit with him. Doug serves on the Presidential Religious Task Force. And there's a group of them that meet. Doug had just met with the presidential task force. President Trump was on the Zoom call, the whole works. And one thing that came out of this Zoom call, and remember, everything I'm sharing with you tonight is suggestions and just we're giving you best practices. It's not mandates from the national office, not mandates from from the U.S. government or the state government. We're just giving you what we're hearing, and then you guys have to filter it out through your local situation. But what was told was 20 to 30, that they are concerned that in the late summer, early fall, there could be a 20 to 30% reduction in income in churches. And so, and the reason that we're sharing that with you is some of you right now, the statistics that are coming out right now is approximately 15% to 20% of churches are seeing an increase in their tithe and giving during the online service. That they're seeing about 2/3 is the same. That of that, I think it's 15% are seeing a deduction of 3 to 5%, and only like 7% are seeing greater than 10% reduction already. And so with that, if your finances have been holding steady during the shelter in place, give me a thumbs up. Just put your hands up or just go, yeah, that's good. If you've been holding steady, I'm not going to ask you, okay. With that, though, some of the people that we've been talking to, they've already started trying to spend their surplus. They're saying, we're going to buy new cameras. We need lighting. We need all this stuff. The interesting thing that what coronavirus has done to us is taught us that simple is not bad if it's authentic and it's passionate, and that if it relates to the audience. So be careful that before you start, if you have surplus, that you say, let's go ahead and buy stuff, because we're really not for sure what's going to happen in the late summer, early fall. So be conscientious of that. Be cautious of that. And the interesting about this, and we haven't said this in the 10 or 2, is that where are we at with the summer camping program in Alabama? I got to make sure. Are we still on, or have we put it on pause, or what? Pastor Ken, you're muted.
It's still on.
Yeah.
It's still on. Okay, well then, all right. So we have all of that we're working with. We have a lot. We have a lot of dynamics. Our summer camping program. We have our, all the different nuances of what's going on with the building. I was just talking. John Lindell has done a major remodeling during this. They're remodeling the main campus and the west campus while the churches are down, which I thought, he hit that one right on time. And we also have to remember that as we're working with our friends, the reason for the reduction is not just because people aren't giving. There's a lot of people who become unemployed. They are getting ready to be unemployed because the business is just taking a hit to the place they cannot respond. And because of that, it's going to affect the way we're going to see things happening in the next 60 days in our church. So be very cautious and conscientious of what's happening with your people as they're going through business and things of that nature. Pastor Ken, we have been working, shared with you just a minute ago, we have been working for a couple of weeks on how do we reopen the general council. And so and it's much more difficult than I thought, because in Missouri, the law states that a mayor can supersede the order of a governor, where in Arkansas, a mayor cannot supersede the order of a governor. So here in Missouri, we have the governor that are saying one thing, our mayor is saying another thing, the trying to make sure that we do nothing that could put anyone in harm's way. And so there has been there has been flow about when do you open the building. And so the decision was made earlier this week that next Monday we would let 25% of the necessity team go back in. And that necessity team has to do with online ordering, shipping, receiving, and accounting and treasury. There will be no one in church ministries unless there is a very urgent reason for them to be in there. So there'll be no one in Rural Rangers, there'll be no one in the youth department, no one in the children's department, no one in the adult ministries department, unless there has been a special request that has validation for them to go back in. The next week, as Pastor Ken shared, we're going to try to bring in 50% of the workforce. And so for my office, I have 6 people who work in my office. So I'm sending 3 in, but I'm not one of the 3 on May 4th. I'm staying out till May 11th. Jimmy White, myself, and Cynthia, my ministry assistant, we will stay out another week, and we will send Melanie, Casey, and Dan in. And this is something that we're having to do from an organizational standpoint. You're going to have to do the same thing from a church standpoint as we get ready to unpack it. So here's a couple things that we're going to ask you to do. Number one, when it becomes time, and now we're talking about the building, okay? We're going to just talk about getting prepared for the building. Before you launch, my number one suggestion is please call your insurance company and find out what the policy says on what you can and can't do when you go back into your building. And here's the reason. Over the next 3 to 6 months, the Wall Street Journal says that approximately or up to 50% of insurance companies could become insolvent. And if you get thinking about it now, we are dealing with over 50,000 deaths, over 200,000 people in hospitals. They have been forking out money, not counting all the other stuff that they're doing all the time. And so there is so much that you have to make sure of. And what they're telling us is that if a church starts up, goes back into the relaunch, and is not abiding to the policy of their insurance company, their insurance company may not will predicting that they will not cover any claims. So let's say you go in and you don't abide by the 6-foot social distancing rules. Someone contracts COVID-19. When you try to make that claim, the insurance company is going to say, we're not going to pay. And so it's very advantageous for you to talk to your insurance agent about your local church. Number 2, and then I'm going to bring Pastor Michael in. Second thing is, if you are a district affiliated church, after you get your green light from the insurance company and they give you the parameters, if you're a district affiliated church, I'm going to recommend that you email Pastor Michael and share with him what your insurance company is doing, because the district is also in liability opportunity with you. And so, in fact, every general council church in Alabama, the district can be part of it, but especially for the district affiliated churches. So make sure that happens. Pastor Michael, do you want to share with what you've shared with us earlier in the day?
Well, what Rick is saying is exactly right. And we've been in communication with our own district insurance company, Church Mutual, and we've made sure that they're in a good financial position. They're strong. They don't have any debt that they use to finance their reinsuring. They do all of that with cash. They have good cash reserves. They're not heavily invested in the stock market, so that's not affecting them like it would have affected, like it is affecting a lot of insurance companies and reinsurance companies. And so Church Mutual is very conservative in the way they function. And so we're good there. And if anybody is here tonight and and you don't have insurance, you need to be insured as quickly as possible. If you're a district affiliated church, you are required to have insurance. It's not an option, insurance. And we're supposed to have verification of your insurance in your file. And so we're going to be readdressing that and make sure that that is a fact. And we're also able to send you a quick quote form from Church Mutual. If you don't have insurance or you're not satisfied, you think your company may be a little sketchy, you went with it simply based on cheapest premiums, we have a quick quote file that we can send you, put you in contact with Church Mutual as fast as possible. And so, so I just affirm everything that Brother Rick said.
Go ahead, Pastor Kidd, please.
Michael, I think what we're going to do out, Brother Sharp, is on the next constant contact that goes out, we're going to give a link to that quick quote, because it would never hurt to get a quick quote from a company that is a very good company.
Right.
And they said that they would write insurance for any church that needed it right now, even though all this has gone down.
Right.
So I would recommend, once we send this out, probably go out tonight, I would fill out that quick quote, send it in, and just see what they say about your insurance. Because I'm telling you, buying cheap insurance like buying a cheap parachute. You don't know if it's going to work until you jump out of the plane.
That's very true.
Pastor Kidd, do we have the capability of putting the quick quote form on the WeTransfer that we've created today? Or do we need to do that separate? Let's do it separate.
Yeah, we'll do it separate.
Guys, this is how serious this is. This is just Bev and Rick Allen. And I didn't say it in the 2 o'clock. Because of everything that has been happening, Bev and I went back to our life insurance policies and realized that we have to make some adjustments, and we have to work on the durable power of attorney, because when we were still in Arkansas when we did our durable power of attorney. We have moved states, and the transfer is more difficult. So we're wanting to come back and do a Missouri durable power of attorney. In fact, we're meeting next week with our attorneys to check our wills, our durable power of attorneys, and everything else, our DNRs. We're making sure that it's compliant. So if you've moved from one state into Alabama, or your children were minors and now they're adults, you may really want to look personally to make sure that you have protected your family and your future and your family's legacy. Pastor Mike, Michael, do you want to jump in on that at all?
No, it's a very good idea. My wife and I started doing that last year, and so we're for this year's out. We may not own very much anything. All we have probably in a family trust.
That's exactly. We're doing the same thing. We're moving stuff to a trust.
Yeah.
And so yeah. So and you can talk to Pastor Michael after this, or email him if you want more information. And go from there. So be sure that you understand that when we get ready to go back to our first Sunday, there's a couple things. We're going to start at the parking lot, and we're going to work our way into the sanctuary. So if you're taking notes, here we go. The first thing is that our parking lots are not designed for social distancing. They're not. Our parking lots are very finite. They're very restricted. It costs a lot of money to put blacktop down. It costs a lot of money to do that. So when we built our parking lots, we built them for the crowd that we expected. If you've been to a Walmart in the last week or in the last month, you will see that they don't practice parking lot social distancing. But their concept is not everybody comes into the parking lot at the same time. Not everybody leaves the parking lot at the same time. It's different for us. We're all coming in about the same time for our Sunday services when we start back up, and we're all going to be leaving about the same time at the conclusion of our service. And if we're going to go to 2 services, we've got to flip a parking lot. So here's the first thing about the parking lot. Be sure that before the first service, if I may make a suggestion, the first suggestion would be to create a document that you can send to your church family, sharing with them how you are watching for them, what you're trying to do to help them feel comfortable and provided and protected. With that, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to bring it up to the top. There's three types of people that'll be coming back to your church when we start back up on our first Sunday. You can group them into one of three classifications. The first class will be the pain point people. There will be a number of people who will come to our church for our first Sunday, whenever that first Sunday is, and they are dealing with pain. They are dealing that they have a loved one who's dealt with coronavirus. They've got a friend who dealt with coronavirus. They may even have someone close to them that has died because of coronavirus. They may have lost their job. They may not have got a stimulus check. They may not. They may have been in a situation where their marriage, because of this shelter in place, the marriage did not get healthier. It became more tense, and they're dealing with pain. And so a lot of people that when you just listen to them on the surface, they're going, you know, our first Sunday is going to be this big celebration. We're going to sing and shout and have when you listen to the cutting edge pastors, they're going, no, we're not doing that. We're actually going to be assessing our congregation in that first time back together again. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So the first group of people, the people who are in pain. The second group of people that you're going to be dealing with is people who are they're grow points, because they know no one who dealt with coronavirus. They have no one who's been sick. They're sympathetic to what's happening with people around the United States, but they personally are not engaged in that. They receive their stimulus check. They've got a paycheck every week. Their marriage has been solid. Their relationships, if they're single, are solid. They may be a little cabin fever, but all in all, they feel their life is going good. Even in the midst of this, Jesus has provided for them. And it's going to be hard when if you have people, someone want to testify and they stand up and say, you know, I'm so glad God took care of me. And then there's a person sitting 3 rows back going, I guess Jesus doesn't love me as much as he loves them, because we have gone through torment. So be careful that you don't hype up that first Sunday. And then the third group of people are the fact people, F-A-C-T, the fact people. They want to know the facts. They want to know what you've done to protect them and what you're doing to provide for them. And this group of people will be, I would say it's going to be 30 to 40% of your congregation. They may be in pain, but they want the facts. They may be in growth, but they want the facts. They want to know what we're doing as a congregation, as leadership, to provide protection and provision for them as they come back to campus. Because if we don't, they'll say, you know what? We'll just watch you online, which was the second most, the greatest area of need that the pastors are having. So when you're doing the parking lot and you're creating a email, a newsletter, whatever, to send to the congregation, one of the things you want to talk about is please be aware that when you come into the parking lot, if someone's getting out of the car next to you, wait till they get out and step away before you get out, or you're going to have this group of people side by side in cars trying to get into the cars at the same time. And you're saying, why is that so important? Because if someone, please don't take this wrong, but if someone does contract the coronavirus, COVID-19, if someone does get that and they can lock it back to the church, there will be litigation. We're living in a land of litigation. We have attorneys across the United States that are waiting for a case to come up to where they can just unload, just drop the hammer. And we do not want to do anything that we cannot show that we did everything within reasonable parameters to help provide and protect. And something else that I heard from Mark Serra out of Australia that I thought was really interesting, he said, we are creating outside signs, these pop-up signs, and it's saying, thank you for honoring the social distance. Let's have church today. But the sign, what happens is when people coming into the building, if they read the signs, it just reminds them as they're walking in the building, don't be hugging people. Don't be running up and shaking hands. Honor the social distancing that our state governments have asked us to do. In that way, because the question becomes, do we have greeters? Do we not have greeters? A lot of churches are not doing greeters on their first Sunday, simply because what do? How many times do you grab the door handle? What are you going to, is someone going to stand out there that every time a couple comes up, you're going to clean the door handle between people when they grab the door handle? I mean, that's stuff you got to think about. It sounds trite, but you've got to do that. So they're talking about putting signs up in the parking lot and at their doors, reminding people to respect the social distancing. So when they get to the door, a couple things that are happening is that you have to be able to actually give 6 feet of clearance in your lobby. Well, you're sitting there going, my lobby doesn't have 6 feet of distance. I'm 12 feet wide by 20 feet long. So you're going to have to make sure that we politely thank them for coming and help them navigate, but don't put a bunch of police, remember social distancing. Signs like that doesn't help, especially our guests, because they've been listening to you online, and their expectations are going to be different than what your congregation is, and we'll get there in a minute. So as they come into the lobby, you have to make sure everything is clean. Another suggestion is that many people are saying no coffee shop. No, we're not doing it. And I've heard some guys are saying, well, we're telling our people to bring their own coffee cup. And the problem is you still got to push a button or you got to grab a handle to get your coffee. Some churches are, very few churches that I've heard that are supplying latex gloves and masks. I don't know 10 churches that are providing that stuff. Most people, they're bringing it with them. So if you have the coffee shop, how do you keep it clean? How do you make sure that you disinfect it? Another thing that has come up is be very cautious and conscientious of restrooms. That how will you keep the restrooms clean? Some people are actually putting latex gloves in bathrooms. So you can actually go into the restroom, put on your gloves, and then throw the gloves away when you leave or after you wash your hands. Do you have the Perel? Will you have Perel there in the bathroom so they actually use the Perel? Are you putting Perel at the sanctuary doors? Another area that you have to think about is children's ministries and nursery. A lot of guys are not, and ladies are not doing children's ministries and nursery. And the reason being is you have to disinfect it. You have to keep it clean throughout the time they're there. So if your kids are running around and they're touching stuff, you have to have somebody in there with a bottle of Lysol or a spray disinfectant spraying behind it for an hour and 15 minutes. And so most of the guys are shutting down their children in the nursery, because here's the deal. The less square footage we have to clean, the better off we are until we can figure out how this is going to work. And so a lot of the churches are doing what they're calling family ministry on the first Sunday. They're having all the kids, all the youth, everyone going to the sanctuary. So if you have any questions right now, I'll just stop right here. And if you have a question, or if Michael, if you have some, just read it to me.
Well, real quick to go back into what you're talking about, in the sanctuary, and you might be coming to this, is about how the clustering the seats and the pews and all that. Are you?
Yeah, we're coming to that.
Okay.
I'm going into the sanctuary, but does anyone have any questions about anything we've talked about so far?
I do.
Yes.
You know, the last thing you talked about was children's ministry. That's one of the things we've been discussing and the staff is about bringing those kids back in, and we've had a lot of mixed opinions about it. One thing I think we're going to hear is from the young couples or parents of these kids, do you have the feeling that they're going to say, well, I'm not going to come if we're not going to have a nursery, we're not going to have children's church? I mean, that is also a concern.
That is a decision that your church leadership team will have to make.
Thank you.
And the majority of what I'm hearing, they realize the risk is too great.
I understand that. Yeah.
You've got to understand, Rick, schools are not in. They're not going to put schools back in because they don't want the risk for children. And I think maybe, Royce, a comeback might be, well, when schools are letting kids together again, we'll do that.
That's good. Thank you. Can I quote you on that?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, people love to quote me as long as it's me getting shot, not them.
Thank you.
And it, if the young couple says, I'm not willing to sacrifice shelter in place to go to a church, to a place where my kids, I can't get separation from them for a little bit. I just should stay home, not deal with the dress up, not to do all that kind of stuff. Then your place, Royce, is to say, we fully understand that. We respect that. We honor that. And so Sunday morning, when we're going to have church, I'm still going to be talking to the online audience, and I'm going to be complimenting you and thanking you for watching today, and that we are so honored you're with us, and because that's one thing we'll be talking about a little bit. You cannot ignore the online audience, because before coronavirus, the average guy that was doing live stream or recording his service, he never talked to the audience while he was taping. Always for the sanctuary. And so we're going to be talking about that in a moment. So the another thing that's coming up, we'll go into the sanctuary, then we'll go into the services. How many of you have chairs in your building? And if you guys have got your faces muted, just give me a hands up and just go, yeah, how many have chairs? Okay. All right. Here's the interesting thing about the chair dynamic in the church service is a lot of people, you got to put the 6 feet, you got to do the 6 foot distance. You got to do social distancing. But a lot of people are just thinking, we're going to take out a group of chairs. We're going to put single chairs every 6 feet. And they're saying, don't do that. You're going to build clusters. You're going to build a group of 4, some groups of 6, some groups of 2, and some singles. You're going to put the singles at the front of the building and the groups of 4 and 6 in the back of the building, because you want the larger groups to exit first. And you can put them in a cluster group. Now, here's the deal. It's got to be family. Friends can't come sit with them. But if you know of a family, if you got a couple families that got 3 kids, put 6 chairs, 5 chairs. Because they want to sit as a family. They don't want to be separated 6 feet apart, and they don't have to be if they're the family unit. So as you're breaking your sanctuary down, and you need to start working on that now, you can start setting up your sanctuaries now and get ahead of it, and actually take pictures and send it out on Facebook page saying, we're ready for our first Sunday. We have a spot for you, and have these different areas for different people. If you have singles, if single people, divorced people, widows, you're going to invite them to come sit in the front, and you're going to make sure that the leadership team and the staff's families are sitting up there with them, and you're going to talk to them. You're going to communicate to them. The families are going to be in the family units and going from there. And so That is one way that you can set up your sanctuary if you have chairs. If you have pews, this is what we've heard. You shut down every other pew. You just block it off, close it down. And then on the pews that they can sit on, they're actually taking tape and marking 6 foot and putting a strip of tape. Go another 6 foot on the pew, put a strip of tape. In other words, you're telling the people, these are the social distancing marks. If you have a family of 4, you guys can sit here, but you can see the markings that help people know the distance. And people appreciate that. They're not going to be upset that you've pinned them in like a zoo. They're going to appreciate that you took the time to help them not have to calculate in their head what's going on with them and their 3 kids. Another thing about the sanctuary that has been a question is, we'll start with the worship team. Everything's got to be clean. All the instruments have got to be clean. If they're bringing an instrument in, you got to ask them, did you clean your instrument before you came in? Because if the coronavirus can be on an instrument for 3 to 4 days, you've got to make sure that they protect their instruments. Also, the mics, the wind screens. I would actually say take wind screens off. That would be my suggestion. Until this is over, remove all the wind screens. It's easier to clean, and you don't have all that saliva in the wind screens. And make sure that the social distancing is 6 foot. Some of the larger churches, they're actually putting X marks on the stage to where the worship teams are going to be standing, so you can see it. And if you watch some of our large churches, if you watched any of that, you will see that their social distancing has been set up to where you can notice it. And some of the guys actually put chairs there where they can sit in the chairs, because they want them to sit in the chairs during the preaching. They don't want them to go down. They want them to stay up there. That's a decision you're going to have to make as you move forward through the service. What are we doing with our prayer teams? With our prayer teams, if you can't lay hands on the sick, you can't anoint with oil, you're going to have family prayer times. And we used to say this. I was raised in a church that sing them till they shout. And Papa Johnson, Bobby Johnson's daddy, used to say all the time, if you need healing, put your hand on yourself. Just physician heal yourself. And just, we're going to pray. You put your hand on where you're hurting, and you can do that again. But the prayer teams, it's not happening. It's just not wise to do that. The offering, how will you receive the offering? The question's been, if you're going to pass the plate, or you're going to pass the bucket, or pass the bag, I don't mind touching it if I'm 1 or 2, but if I'm 25, 30, and it's just been passing down the aisles, the pews, I don't want to touch it. So some of the people are actually putting boxes in the back on tables and chairs, and just saying, hey, as you walk out the door, if you would like to give, you can give there. Another thing, and I really didn't say it, is if you've been doing online giving, give your church an opportunity to do online giving in the building. And the greatest way was, when Terry Law taught me, he said, Rick, if you're going to do stuff, you share with them how to do it. So when we would take up offerings, it was before social and electronics, but every Sunday, Bev and she would come up on the platform, or I would write my check out on the stage. I was being a participant in the giving. So if you want to do that, you just tell everybody, hey, we're going to do, for those of you who are going to give, as you walk out the room, thank you so much. But hey, I'm going to do online giving. Why don't you do it with me today? And let's do it this way, and have people walk through it. Teach them how. What we have learned in men's ministries is men need to know how to do it. They don't need to know what to do. And so that's where help them, walk them through, talk them through it, show them how it's done. And then in the service itself, we've got to realize, what if someone wants to go to the restroom? How do you protect them going to the restroom so they don't sit out in the lobby? Guys, there's so many, and ladies, there's such an opportunity for something to go wrong that we have to spend a lot of time making sure it goes right. And so, and remember this, don't allow your emotions to dictate you as you're setting this up. Emotions deal with your feelings. Passions deal with your spirit. Be sure that the Holy Spirit is moving through your passion grid and not your mental man moving through your emotions grid. So be able to register that and go from there. As we're going through the building, when you get ready to leave the service, if you have the opportunity, because if you dismiss the service, everyone's going to head to the doors, everyone's going to head to the lobby. A suggestion's been made that you release the building in different areas. At this time, thank you for being here today, and to honor you and to respect you. What we're going to do is we're going to ask for the left side, my left, your right. We're going to let that side leave first today. And thank you for respecting all the ordinances as you leave the building. As you guys clear out, then we'll let go of the center. And when the center's out of the doors, then we'll let go of the right. And in that way, we will not have a bottleneck at doors trying to get out. We will not have a bottleneck in the parking lot, and we will be respectful of the social distancing laws and the community standards. And so that is something that we have to be very cautious of. For those of you who are going through the Acts 2 and Retreat 2, we talked about core values. And one of the things that we talked about was convictions. What's the difference in convictions and preferences? That there's a biblical absolute, a community standard, and then a personal conviction and a personal preference. And that is the order in which we respect it. Biblical absolutes, community standards, personal convictions, and preferences. And so that is one thing that we can do to make sure that we honor that. Michael, is there any questions right now that you have coming in, or does anyone want to ask me a question?
I haven't seen anything in the chat, so just unless anyone has anything.
Okay. Does anyone have anything here that you want to ask me about right now? Okay. Let's say that because of social distancing, you're thinking about going to 2 services. I don't have enough chairs. I can't get everybody in the building with social distancing. It's just, I don't have the space. So we were going to go to 2 services. And I have been amazed at the number of guys that are wanting to flip their service in 15 to 30 minutes. And so the question I always ask is, how are you disinfecting the building for the second crowd? Because you're going to have to disinfect the building between the first service and the second service. The second service has to have a clean building too. And so that's another reason why limiting the square footage that you're using assists you in turning the building for a second service. Is anyone in here thinking about going to multiple services when you go back because of social distancing and stuff? Okay, with that, I see a couple of you guys, Patrick and John, and some of you guys. The concern that you have to, here's the concerns that you need to think about. How many people can I get to help us clean the sanctuary, the lobby, and the bathrooms before the second crowd gets here? You're going to have to use people from the first crowd to help you clean the restroom and the disinfectant for the second crowd. They can't come in and clean their own area. You're going to have to find people, whether it's your lay team, whether it's your staff, whether it's your board and staff. The more people you have, the faster you can make the turn. And with that, remember that you've got to be able to give time to get people to get off the parking lot and clear out of the parking lot before people start coming back onto the parking lot. So you'll give them more space and distance. So some of the guys are going, and this is just stuff that I've been hearing. Some of them are going 9 to 10, 11 to 12, and they're taking 1 hour to clean the building between the two services. So that way they can make sure everything is prepared for that second service. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just had a question. So what do you suggest for, there may be a service that's more, appealing, whether people want to come to the first one or the second one. And, what do you do if you get too many people that try to come to one service and you can't fit them in that capacity? How do you kind of mitigate that?
That's a great question, John. The suggestion that we would make is just like the same thing when you are getting ready to go to multiple services, even without the COVID-19. Every time we went to go to a service or a multiple service, we had to sit down and take the core group of leaders and attendees of our church. We took that core group list, sit down, it may be 20 families, it may be 40 families, it may be whatever. And we actually asked them to go to 2 different services. We split the group in half, John. That way we had equal spirituality in both services. We had equal engagement of worship in both services. And we would ask them to give us 9 months, because that's the time of birthing. At 9 months, you'll know whether or not that service is going to work. They've had enough time that they've got accustomed to it. They have now put their roots in there. They've made new friends with that new service. And one of the mistakes that a lot of churches do when they go to multiple services is they don't look at their core congregation and ask them to serve in the 2 areas. So they have all their leaders and stuff go to one service, and then the second service, there's the spirituality level is much shallower. And your guest comes in and goes, "No, wait a minute. This is not what I saw when I watched you online." So the first thing is I would actually look at the people and start looking at the list now and start talking to them and asking them, guys, we're thinking about doing this. If we do this, would you mind going to the second service? And giving us 6 months. By then, we should know something from our state government on what we need to be doing. And that's the first thing. The second is to make sure that if I'm wanting to keep the level of engagement high, I'm going to ask the worship team to sing songs we know. And I'm even going to go as far as say, sing the sweet songs. Sing the choruses everybody knows. Sing choruses that don't have 17 verses. Sing stuff that they feel they know that when our church sings this song, the glory comes off. The presence of God comes down. That's what I'm asking my worship team to do. Guys, I'm asking you, please, for the next couple of weeks, let's really start looking at what we're going to sing, how we're going to sing it, and how we're going to move through it. And with that, John, we'll just keep going, because if you've been doing a 60-minute online service and your average church service before coronavirus was an hour 45, you now need to start talking to leadership, saying, guys, because of the social crowd, because of our online crowd and the number of people that have been coming to us online, should we reset the time to make it more consistent to what we were doing when we were only ministering to the online crowd? So you're going, well, let's say you're doing your online service is now a 60-minute and you were doing an hour and a half. Well, in that 60 minutes, you have been able to strategically tighten up the worship package. Number 2, you as a pastor have been praying for the needs of people. Number 3, you've asked them to give online. And number 4, you've presented a message. and you've done all that in an hour. You got to ask yourself, how much wiggle room is that crowd going to give you? Because you may keep the online, you may keep the in-house crowd, but your online crowd may leave you. Because if you're using Facebook, Facebook doesn't tell you how long they were on the call. And if you're on Facebook for 3 seconds, it's counted as a click. And so if you're looking at the number of people who came to your service, it may say you had 300 people or 120 and you're running 60. You're going, look at how many people. Well, they may only been with you for 13 seconds. They may have been with you 30 seconds. You don't know. There's no way to measure that. So don't misunderstand that number. But understand that they did take the time to look. That's the key. They took time to look at what you were doing. They had options, millions of thousands, tens of thousands of services, and they came by your place. And if they live in your area, they're not going to go to Steve Furtick in Charlotte. They don't want to drive there, but they could come to you. So be sure that what you're going to do in that first service, you have strategized it all. You know what you're going to say at the beginning. You know what you're going to say at the end of the worship set. You know what you're going to do in the prayer time. You know what you're going to do for your offering. Do not let your non-intentional communication hurt you for people who are coming to see you. So really think it through. I'm not telling you to script it out, but I am saying have knowledge of where you're at with it. And then season it with prayer from the Holy Spirit before the Sunday. So the worship team, ask them. Then be sure that you work through the patterns. Then it comes to the message. Something that has been coming out is, like I said, a lot of people are saying, when we go back in, we're preaching vision. We're going to talk about where we're going to go. We're actually going to use that Acts 2 vision statement. We're going to go. My suggestion to you is hold that. You've got pain point, grow point, fact point people sitting in your building. You really need to find out where they're at and see. You will visibly see the excitement in their heart and the excitement in their spirit, or you're going to see the burden of their heart and the struggle in their spirit. You will see it. You have to read it. You're the shepherd of the sheep. So the suggestion that's being made is that you think about your first message, or the first couple messages should be on the lordship of Christ. The hope of the church is Christ. You preach on the salvation, the goodness of God, that Christ is our healer. Preach on the Psalms 23 message. Preach a message that brings hope to the people. They're looking for hope. They're coming to you saying, do you have something that can anxiously re-engage my spirit? I need it. And so be sure that you're ministering to them. They need their vision renewed before the churches needs theirs declared. Just renew their heart, renew their hope, renew their passion, and preach that message or the next couple weeks on Romans 15, on the great chapter of hope. Really give them something that when they leave, they go, man, that was refreshing. And remind them of who Christ is and not what Christ will do for them. Remind them he is the solid foundation. He is the firm anchor. He's our Messiah and our soon coming King. And remind them of the love of God. Remind them of the peace of the Spirit. Remind them of the ministry of the Holy Spirit. Wherever you're going, that is what they're looking for. That's what people are hungry for. And so think about that as you're working through that process. Another thing is, if you're going to have families in the sanctuary, and let's just say you're doing a 60-minute service, and within the worship set, guys and women who are leading churches are actually putting a children's church song in the worship set. They're not adding it to the worship set. They're making it part of the worship set. They're singing a song that gets kids sing in the children's church. It may be a chorus that you guys sing in the sanctuary, but they're making sure that they're engaging the kids at the beginning. And the pastors, when they're preaching, part of their message is actually aimed at the kids. It's actually for them. That you tell a story about when you were a kid. You talk about something that can relate to the children. Because what you're doing there is you're telling the parents, you're telling the families, your children are important to us. They're not in children's church, but we're going to do everything we can not to forget them while they're in the building. You do the unexpected, you'll never be forgotten. Is there any questions yet, Michael, or anybody asking anything?
Hey, Rick.
Yes.
Hey, Rick. Hey, one
Hey,
thing
Jack.
I'd like to say, let me just say this. One thing I haven't heard, and I think these are three important points, okay? As a healthcare provider, let me make a couple of suggestions. Number one, educate. Number two, educate. Number three, educate. Find somebody in your church, maybe a nurse, maybe a physician. Get them to educate, first off, your staff. I've worked with these people now for 6 weeks. One of the things that I think will help tremendously is to educate, first off, educate your staff. There's going to have to be some work done on the church, got to be some things done as the cleaning and the separation, keeping people at 6 feet apart. Another thing is get your ladies ministry or someone in the community. Why don't we have them here in our little town? They're making cloth masks. Everybody has to have a mask to come into church. If you don't have one, we'll provide one for you when they get there. The sanitation of the hands, make sure they do that. Latex gloves, that is really a big no-no. You put latex gloves on, you still have your germy hands inside the gloves. I see people in the grocery store getting groceries with latex gloves on. They're still handling the vegetables and fruits and the canned goods from the grocery store. They go home with their latex gloves on. They still have all the germs on the gloves they touch their doorknob with, their keys with, their steering wheel with. Then they go put their groceries up in their house and have not wiped them down. So they've carried all the germs from the grocery store into their home. And that's one thing we as healthcare providers are saying, unless you're dealing directly with the patient, latex gloves really doesn't do any good. I think if we'll begin now to educate our people and use some common sense practices you're already doing, and keep that sensible so that everybody knows. But again, find a healthcare provider. If you don't have a nurse in your church, find one at your local hospital. Find a doctor that'll come in and do a video chat with your people so that they know what to expect and what they can do and what they can learn to set the stage for when they do come back. That's just a big suggestion. To me, it's educate.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jack, that's good. I heard it several weeks ago, put it this way. If you get glitter all over your hands, same thing with the virus. Whatever you touch, it transfers. And you have to think of it like that. Everywhere you go, you're transferring.
That's correct.
And people are transferring to you, including your phone, your wallet, your money, and whatever. Jack, I think you learned something good. If we could find a doctor who could do a video clip from a health professional side talking to the church on your return and some key ideas, that might be a good thing.
Especially if it's an infectious disease specialist. There are some in Montgomery, I'm sure, that maybe even go to some of our churches. But just let me say this has been funny. I haven't noticed. I've been watching all you guys. One of the first things you're doing is touching your face. That's a big no-no. I just saw some of your.
I washed my hands.
Guess what? You just got your saliva all over your hand. You're going to touch something somewhere.
There's my Perel right
We're all
there.
guilty of it because I know we're all guilty of it, but we can't. There's just some habits we're going to have to learn to do a little differently. And I think this is becoming a new norm for a while.
I do, and Jack, that's where I'm headed with what you're just saying. Some pastors are not going to require masks. Some pastors are going to require masks. It's going to be dependent upon what the city ordinance or the state ordinance is on what's going to happen. If the state does not say you have to wear a mask, it's going to be hard for us to tell people you can't come in our church if you're not wearing a mask. If the state doesn't say
Right.
you
You
have
can't litigate anything above state law. I mean, you can't litigate and say you got to have it, but we strongly recommend that you do. That's all you can do is just strongly recommend. Again, go back and educate your people. My church happens to be in the county that had no corona virus at all for quite a long time, Geneva County. Now we've got 5. And I can tell you, as a healthcare provider, I don't see where our numbers were so low working in Houston County, where we're seeing, 85 or so. And then we get a lot of people from Georgia at our hospital.
Well,
but I think, again, go back to educate.
And one thing we can do is, I think if we could find a doctor that could shoot a PSA for us that we could put on a district website or a district Facebook page so people could watch it and download
That'd
it,
be great.
that would be available. Here's a couple last thoughts that I want to share with you. I've shared with you about what's happening, talking about the ministry. Here's some thoughts that you may want to put onto your radar screen. Number one, this may be a good time for you to start doing your Zoom meetings with your leadership team and your Acts 2 teams, to start preparing them, your worship team and your board, and start preparing them for getting ready for the church first Sunday. And meet with them, talk to them, pray with them over Zoom, and just begin to work through what's going to happen. Don't wait for the week that they say this Sunday you can have church. Start working on it now. It's coming in the next, unless something very weird happens, you guys are going to have church in the next 2 to 6 weeks, I would guess. And you might as well start working on it now and making sure you have that. In that, be sure when you're doing your Zoom meetings or your telephones, you rally your leadership. The 2 greatest people of pain that's happening right now are the people who are the core leaders. They are going through so much burden right now. If they're intercessory prayer people, if they're feeling the weight of it. So be sure that those people who are in your leadership circle, that you talk to them one-on-one between now and the first service and tell them how much you appreciate them, how much they're viable to you, and how much you're excited about working with them in the future. Make them feel wanted as they come back to the building. The second group of people who are struggling are the people who are shallow and the guest. The people who are believers in Christ, they believe in Jesus Christ, they just don't practice the behaviors of it. They're going to be struggling because I love my sister. She's a new believer. She is so mad, and she does not understand why the church just does not step up and rebuke the whole thing. And I'm saying, Mary, doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work. She said, well, I just don't understand why we just can't do this and why we can't do that. And I said, Mary, you're just being way too emotional. You got to let God have his time. The next thing is that you be sure on Sunday, our first Sunday, compliment the congregation. Compliment them. Thank them for being there. And remember, everybody open up the chat. Could you guys everybody open up your chat right now? Okay? And in the next 30 seconds, I want everyone to type amen. Just type it and send it. Everybody type amen and send it. And start watching the chat screen. Look at all those amen. This is something that you can do even starting Sunday. As you're preaching online and when you're going back into your services, during your messages, ask them to give, hey, someone put praise the Lord on the screen, or hey, let me know how you're doing. What you're doing there is you're keeping that social audience connected. Even if they don't respond to you, they realize you recognize them. They are more than just people on the other side of the lens. and you're letting them know that they have value in what you're doing. So compliment your congregation. Next, be very authentic in your prayer time. Be transparent with your feelings, but don't share your vulnerabilities. Share with them the transparencies, but don't share with them their vulnerabilities. If you and your wife have been, you just had to get out because you didn't know if you lived another 3 days with your wife if you stay married, don't say that. They're going to use that against you someday. Pastor Ken, I see you. Did you pop on? Oh, got his Lysol. There you go. And
Hey,
so that.
Hey, Jack,
So also, huh?
spray the screen, Jack. Will that help?
Yeah.
Wait,
And so let me wrap up with this. As you're going back into the building, we have to find short-term wins. We really need to find short-term wins to get some momentum. So here's some areas of short-term wins. Number one, we're looking for short-term wins with families. So if families are sharing with you how how they've got more intimate with Christ, their family devotions, they're talking to their kids about Jesus, that is a good thing. Share that if you can without embarrassing anybody. Another short-term win will be with friends. If some of you may have people that you're talking to 2 or 3 times a week, share with people how that circle of friends that you were praying with and talking to and checking in with, how important it was. Because the guests that are coming in, they're going to feel that this is a place where they can find character. The third short-term win is with your outreaches. If many people, just like today, we had Convoy of Hope show up at the campground to help 14 churches. If you're doing a feeding program, share it. If you're in a county or in where you have volunteer, be sure you do something special in the next 30 days for your volunteers, your first responders. Cook a barbecue meal and have them come by with a drive-by and pick it up and have signs out there telling them. If you have a hospital, county hospital, you may want to go get 8 dozen donuts and take them in there and say, this is from our church, to thank everyone who's helping in the hospital. Do the act of kindness to those who have served us so diligently through this time. Honor them, and it'll go a long way. So make sure the outreaches are there. Celebrate the financial blessings that God is giving, but don't do it at the discretion of those who are suffering. And lastly, be sure you thank and do the short-term wins on how the people have adapted to the building and how they're handling Sunday. And there's just one more thing I want to share with you, and this is a question that some churches are asking. Do we or don't we check temperature when people come into the doors? That's a decision that your state and your leadership will have to determine. If the state does not determine it, then you will. And we talked about this in the 2 o'clock. In Arkansas, the law is the governor is the ultimate voice. A city mayor or a consulate or city government cannot supersede the orders of the governor. In Missouri, a city government can supersede the actions of the governor. So if the governor has a shelter in place and the city decides they don't want to do the shelter in place, the city doesn't have to do it. The city government is the ultimate voice. So that is why we are dealing with things in Missouri. So I'm not for sure how it goes, but one thing that came out in the 2 o'clock meeting was about what Bill shared with us, who was in law enforcement, that whatever the code is from the state in Alabama, if I remember what he said, Pastor Ken and Pastor Michael, the city, if they're going to adjust the governor's code, it has to be more strict. It
Right.
cannot be more lenient.
Right.
Correct.
And so so whatever's coming out, please respect the laws of the land. Please honor what's happening. Is there any questions, Michael? Or are we good? Does anyone want to ask a question or make a statement? Oh, by the way, David Strahan brought up something really important in the last couple meetings. Buy your cleaning supplies now, because there's only going to be so many cleaning. Just in case there is another run on it.
Right.
Pastor Michael, is there anything that I have left out that you want to jump in on?
I think you did a great job, and I actually wanted to say that this is really good practical stuff. You know, I appreciate the relaunch kit that came out from the General Council, but two things. One, what Rick shared here tonight is exactly what our pastors and lay leaders need to hear. It's what Brother Ken was talking about yesterday in a staff meeting. It's exactly or Wednesday, what we needed to hear. And I encourage you to take it to heart. Also, number two, if you're engaged in Acts 2 already, I strongly encourage you to really stay focused with your lay leaders. Stay focused in Acts 2. Work this advice out in the context of Acts 2. Let Brother Ken and Brother Rick guide you in that. Don't try to jump into the relaunch package that the General Council sent out. Lose focus from Acts 2. Just stay in that and use what Brother Rick has said tonight. So just continue to be great at complying with the government guidelines, with what the district is asking you to do and the General Council is asking you to do. And so I think that was about it.
Right.
It's very important that we are in compliance during this time. When you go back to preaching, the topics Brother Rick mentioned are exactly right. That's exactly right. That's what your people need to hear. Hope. And delve back into history a little bit, and show them what the church has been through before, and came through victorious before. Show them what our own fellowship has done before, what the church around the world has been going through. We're going to make it. All we have to do is listen to the Holy Spirit, be still before God, and keep the main things the main things. Simplify. Take the advice that Brother Rick and Brother Ken and the team are giving you. And we're going to make it. We're going to make it, and God's going to bring out a stronger, I think, leaner, stronger, more effective and focused church on the other side of this if we'll do these things.
You know what you're saying. I used a quote that I had read somewhere from Winston Churchill. Later in researching, I never could find where he actually said it, but it was so good, I'll quote it again just in case he said it. He said, if Hitler knew our history, he would know our future. And, that's a powerful thought with the church. We know the history of the church. We know it survived many things. And that same Lord, King, and General of all the troops is going to help us make it through this. And we're going to be victorious. And we're going to come out of this thing. And he's going to be with us. Let me say this to the ministers that are on here. If you are facing, and I think David had shared with me earlier today, depression is up 800%.
Yes.
And not only that, but domestic violence is increased. Let me tell you, you can ask Cindy, ministers aren't perfect. She knows me. They're none of us perfect. We're facing things. We're going through stuff. We are supposed to be the people who have all the answers, and we don't have them all right now. I don't have them all. You don't have them all. Nobody has all of them. We're walking this thing together to get to where we've got to go. And I believe I know we're going to get there. But don't let the pressure damage you, hurt you, incapacitate you, or make you come out the other side of this thing unhealthy. If you are facing any kind of depression, if you're facing any kind of deep anxiety, anything, you can't afford to keep it bottled up and kept inside. You've got to find a way. You need to either find a faithful friend. Now, don't don't rip your shirt off and show your Superman that's no longer there. Don't be so transparent with your people that they can come back and use it on you later. But find you a friend that you can trust, that you can bare your soul to, who will love you enough to understand you're human just like they are, pray with you and encourage you. And also Dr. Robert Carter, our counselor here in the district, he's open. He'll talk with you. He'll help you process. What I'm saying is don't bottle it up and keep it inside. You say, well, I pray. Yeah, we all do. But, we need sometimes people that are flesh and blood to just look at and say to them, hey, you know what? I'm having a hard time. I'm having a hard time processing this. I mean, we all are. I mean, I know what you're going through. We at the district, we're facing at minimum right now $150,000 in financial losses at the camp from council reservations. Our camping program, youth and children's, they're facing tremendous loss. But even with all these things, guys, and whatever you're facing, our God is still on the throne. He's got it figured out. He's going to walk us through it. Don't let it fall on you. Reach out for somebody to help you if you need help. And don't feel guilty if you have to reach out for help. Let me just give you permission to reach out. And you can say, hey, Ken told me to do that. But I just want to encourage you on that. I don't want you damaged and hurt and can't function.
Thank you, Pastor Ken. There's two things I want to say before we close in prayer. And number one is that you will be seeing an email or some type of communique from the district about the Acts 2 Zoom meeting that will happen next week. If you're an Acts 2 pastor, or if you want to invite your Acts 2 people on, that's great. I would say don't invite too many, because what we're really going to be talking to the pastors about is what are we doing for those who are going into retreat 3 and those that are going into retreat 4. If you're not an Acts 2 pastor, we are going to be talking about some of the stuff that could help for any pastor, but we're going to set up a special Zoom meeting next week. Second of all, what Pastor Michael said was point on, and here's the deal. When 9/11 hit, the 4 to 6 weeks after 9/11, there was more people in church than prior to 9/11. But when Easter 2002 came, there was less people in church on Easter 2002 than there was in Easter 2001. And there was a 9/11 in the middle. This moment that has opened God, what the enemy meant for bad, God's going to turn it for good. And don't let this obstacle, this struggle point, don't let it go by, because it's a time where people are desperately wanting to talk about God. They're wanting to talk about Christ. They're wanting you to pray. People who aren't even Christians. I mean, I got my next door neighbors, they're lesbians. They're telling me God bless you right now. They're a great couple. I mean, are they in sin? Absolutely, but they're good people. But for them to sit out there, and they come over the other day, we're in our front yard and asking us, can you pray with us? Well, sure. What do you need us to pray? We don't know what's going on. Well, we'll pray. I mean, everybody's hungry. Let's don't miss the moment. So thanks, Pastor Ken. It's been a great day, and I'll let you close. And thank you for letting me be part of this today.
Oh, thank you so much. You bless us in this thing, and we deeply appreciate this. Monday night, guys, 7:14 is our prayer meeting. You can look out on the all the different groups we've got, Facebook groups, and our Alabama District Council Facebook page. We're actually going to be doing it this week using the Alabama District Council Facebook page live. We're going to go live there. So go out if you would, and hit like on that so you can get a notification if you want it. But we just feel like we can probably hit more of an audience using Facebook. And when we do it, get your people to do it. Start Facebook parties with it. And let's just keep it, domino effect taking place with that and getting out there. And as we advertise it, share our advertisements and get those out there as well. But hey, we appreciate that. Anybody else? Is there anything before we close? Everybody okay? Listen, what I do, Ben Russell, who is our U.S. missionary, Youth Alive, ministering on the campuses of teenagers and kids. If anybody understands the impact of the craziness that's going on, I want Ben to close us out in prayer, if you would, Ben. I'd appreciate it if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Lord, you've been so faithful to us through this season, God, and we just know right now that, as Brother Rick just said, something great is going to come out of this season.
Amen.
And Lord, I know even personally that there's not another district I'd rather be a part of going through this together than Alabama. And so, Lord, again, we put our churches, we put our ministries, we put all those things in your hands, God, as they always are. We know that you're going to guide us through this, God. And you have your hand on every one of our families. And Lord, I just thank you for this time that we've had together to be sharpened and to be encouraged to know we will go through this, Lord. And just to see a great revival across Alabama. In Jesus' name, amen.